We have the Premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew, standing by. He, of course, is in, you're still in Mississauga, I believe, Premier, where you had your meeting with the other premiers today. What was your reaction when Doug Ford put Chrystia Freeland on speakerphone in your meeting and she thanked you all for your work on a day when she is leaving as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister?
Well, it was nice to hear from Chrystia Freeland. Certainly we've had the ability to do some good things together for Manitobans and Canadians. And I'd been texting with her earlier in the day, and it was just nice to have that chance as a group to thank her for the job that she did. But I want to make clear that while there is this whole drama unfolding in Ottawa, the conversation in the room really did focus on Trump and how do we present this unified response as the premiers. The leadership, is for us to present this Team Canada approach, and we are united when it comes to the need for investments in the military, border security, to crack down on drug trafficking. And the reason why we as premiers were able to come together on those points is because what's the downside? These are things that benefit Canadians, they benefit Manitobans. And so certainly, even though you have an interesting day in Ottawa to perhaps put it charitably, we as premiers are still focused on job one, which is protecting jobs, protecting your jobs and our economy, and just making sure that we're ready for January 20th.
Well, look, interesting is one word for it. I'll give you that, Premier. But I'm wondering, as someone who has been asked to be part of Team Canada since that First Ministers meeting you had a couple of weeks ago, where you made the very salient point that you're not going to argue your way out of this with Donald Trump. I wonder where you think this leaves Team Canada if the chair of the Canada-U.S. Committee at the federal level, the person who led the NAFTA renegotiations last time, is gone, and the Prime Minister is even further diminished by this move.
Well, I think it shows that it is the premiers who are going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting this time. And I think that was already the plan. We communicated that to the Prime Minister and to the ministers who were on those previous calls. But we've also been reaching out to our counterparts in the United States of America. We're talking about people in Congress. We're talking about people at the state level. And it really is, I think, that kind of all hands on deck approach that we as the leaders of the provinces and territories can bring forward right now, adding those perspectives when it comes to boosting the military spending so that it reaches 2%, that NATO target. Again, adding resources on the border, helping to crack down on the scourge that's driving the addictions crisis, drug trafficking. When we put that all together, I do think that we're building a comprehensive approach. And, at this moment where the federal government is going through this turmoil, I think it is hopefully reassuring to Canadians that you do have a consensus among premiers, even on topics where on other days perhaps there's a little bit of disagreement, if you will. Today, 100% unity. Unity right. That we need to present a common Team Canada approach that, as we still look ahead to January 20th, the opening moves, if you will, in terms of our response with the U.S. should focus on the border, should focus on military spending, should focus on cracking down on illegal drugs in this country. I think that given the timing of where we're at, it's a good opening step in terms of Team Canada's relationship with an incoming Trump 2.0 administration.
Look, I appreciate the alignment that exists at the Premier's table on the need to work together on this and have some alignment on this. There is misalignment on retaliatory issues and tariffs and exports being cut off. And I do appreciate that you can reach across the border to your counterparts. The problem, Premier, is that you're premiers and you have no constitutional authority to do international trade or to do foreign affairs, and that falls on the federal government. And right now, they got problems. So who speaks to Trump? Right? I know you can reach across the border and speak to governors and state senators and these things, but it is Donald Trump and the people in his orbit that need to be convinced. And is that something the premiers can do? Because that's the job of the federal government.
Well, I think we have an important role as premiers to help in this period, definitely. Let's keep in mind, President-elect Trump is still the president-elect. He hasn't been sworn in yet. His trade representatives, his cabinet secretaries have not been sworn in yet. And I think one thing that we all know about negotiation is that the party that's in a rush to get to a conclusion through a negotiation tends to give away their leverage. And so we need to recognize that this is going to be a longer-term situation that we're dealing with. as Canada. And as a result, I think putting everything into the light of day in terms of some of the talk that's kind of been out there about potential retaliatory steps or other things like that, I don't know that this is the appropriate time for that. Instead, what I do think is an appropriate first step for this interim period is for leaders at the subnational level, the premiers of the provinces and territories, to come out and say, you know what, what's the downside of military investment? It benefits our communities, it benefits the Canadian Armed Forces, it helps to send a message that we're a trusted ally to the incoming administration. What's the downside of cracking down on drugs to make communities safer? What's the downside of ensuring that there are resources at the border, not only for security, but also for humanitarian purposes? So I do think that there's an important role that the premiers are playing, and the fact that we have this table, the Council of the Federation, where you have Conservatives, New Democrats, Liberals, non-partisan premiers all working together, not just across party lines, but also across provincial and territorial lines. Hopefully that's a sign of hope for Canadians who are maybe following along with the day's news in Ottawa and wondering what's going on there.
Premier, just as a final question, look, we have seen the opposition Conservatives say it's time for an election. Scott Moe has said much the same thing. I think even Daniel Smith has echoed that position. Jagmeet Singh called for Justin Trudeau to step down today. Members of his caucus are going to make that call. What do you think is in the best interests of Canada right now, from this point to January 20th, when Donald Trump's inauguration is slated for, and that is the presumptive deadline for the imposition of the tariffs? What needs to happen at the federal level to put Canada in the best position between now and then?
What needs to happen at the federal level is we need to commit to the NATO 2% target immediately. We saw in the numbers that were released in the economic statement today that money is being spent, so let's spend it on the Canadian Armed Forces. And while we're at it, let's invest in law enforcement to crack down on drugs and send a clear message that we are hard on people who are trafficking, but we have compassion for people who are living with addictions. And then, of course, let's send that message on the border. If we do those three things, then a unified Team Canada, with the premiers playing the role that we're stepping up to do, I think we can have a good opening move in terms of positioning ourselves for the incoming Trump administration.
But do you think there should be a federal election or a change in the Prime Minister's office, sir?
I wouldn't want anyone to ever come to Manitoba and call for an election, so I think I'll leave my comments about the Council of Federation consensus we had today.
I can appreciate that answer, Premier Kinew. I get it. All right, that's Premier Wab Kinew of Manitoba. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for being here again today.
Thanks for having me.